Forgotten City, Chapter 12. Quickly, he said. He stopped being careful and pushed further into the morass of branches. Asha and Fionn pressed close behind. As he jumped between a forked trunk, the lights from the snatcher intensified. He didn't need his flashlight anymore. "It's coming this way fast!" cried Asha. Kobe looked back and saw the metal contraption picking its way through behind them. Its shell bashed into the choker roots with brute force, and Kobe heard one of them snap. At the same moment, horror gripped his chest as the branches around them stirred to life. The thick roots squirmed and flexed like the tentacles of some giant squid. Kobe ducked as one swept overhead. It's searching for prey. The snatcher continued after them, knocking this way and that by the snaking roots, but coming on relentlessly. Shafts of blinding light cut across Kobe's path as he struggled on. Checking Asha and Fionn were still on his heels. He'd head one way, then see it closing off, only for another gap to open. He heard the crunch of metal and saw the snatcher tip to its side. Its legs were being trapped by the strangling roots, and one of them broke off in a shower of sparks. Still, the thing pressed on. Kobe reached the far side at last, diving through a space just before the roots tightened. Fionn came out on all fours, scrambling through to safety as well. The snatcher was almost on them. Asha was still a few feet inside. She tried to run toward them, only to be tripped. The flash of the snatcher closed in suddenly, reaching out an arm that clamped over her lower leg. She let out a scream, "Help me!" Kobe reached in and found her arm, but when he tugged, she didn't move. "Fionn, grab on too!" shouted Kobe. At any moment, he expected the roots to seize on Asha. If they did, it was over. Fionn took Asha's other arm, grimacing. The rifle was just visible, but Kobe couldn't see a way to reach it. And still, the snatcher wasn't letting go. The tendrils of choker plant were lashing across its carapace, and as each did, Kobe saw them tighten with immense power, denting the metal as they squeezed. The contraption was trying to move, but could only shift a little, its sensor arrays jerking this way and that as its robot mind tried to work out what was happening. It made Kobe think of a fly trapped in a web, when every move only worsened its fate. Kobe's grip began to slip on Asha's arm, and he knew he was seconds from losing her. The terror etched on his features told him she knew exactly the same. Please, he thought, not like this. Then, Fionn let go. Asha screamed, but Fionn thrust his arm deep into the roots, gritting his teeth. A moment later, the vine jerked and recoiled, and suddenly, Kobe was falling back, crying out with a mighty heave. Asha slid free. They hauled her together out of the withering plant and didn't stop dragging until they were well clear. A single metal arm reached out after them before a terrible crunching of metal and fizzing of sparks. The arm flopped, and the rest of the snatcher disappeared completely in the constricting choker branches. For a moment, they all breathed heavily in shock. Then, Kobe realized what must have happened. Fionn had managed to pull the rifle's trigger, discharging a dart into the choker plant. Not enough to kill an organism so huge, but enough to slow it down just for long enough. "You saved her," he said, and Fionn, pale and sweating, nodded grimly. Kobe stood up, regaining his senses. With any luck, and he thought they were due some, the choker plant would stop any more snatchers from coming through from that direction, so they'd bought themselves some time at least. "Yes, I'm fine," Asha was saying as Fionn looked at her leg. Apart from a tear in her blue shorts, she looked unhurt. Kobe turned his attention farther down the tunnel and felt his heart sink into despair. It was completely blocked by another massive choker plant. It looked like the roof had collapsed as well, mixing with blocks of masonry and tangled, rusting vehicles. "We're trapped," he said simply. They walked slowly toward the looming mountain of roots and debris. Kobe stared at it helplessly. Even with his strength, there was no way they could even begin to shift enough to find a way through. "We're going to die down here." "What is it, Fionn?" asked Asha. Kobe saw the boy had drifted off toward the edge of the tunnel and was peering at a swath of lianas? Lianas, okay. He shined the flashlight that way and saw that the vines were actually half covering the mouth of a side tunnel. Theon scooped some aside with his hands. The opening was a flattened circle about 4 feet across and 3 feet tall. From the rough gouges in the solid layers of concrete, it looked like it had been chipped away rather than bored mechanically. Whoever had dug it had left the jagged ends of pipework and wired frayings at the edges. Kobe shined his flashlight inside and saw the tunnel led slightly downward, roughly straight. Looking at his map, he couldn't figure out where it could possibly go. "We have no idea what's down there," he said. "We didn't let that stop us before," Asha reminded him. "Besides, we have no choice. I'll go first." She took the flashlight from Kobe's hand and climbed in, shuffling down feet first. Theon went next, with Kobe following at the rear. The passageway had a few smaller branches at odd angles, but they stuck to the main route. No way people made this, thought Kobe. They wouldn't even fit down some of those offshoots. He pushed the anxieties aside. The concrete of the walls gave way to bare earth, with occasional fragments of what looked like beams of timber. It was hard to judge the distance in the tunnels, but Kobe guessed they'd gone about 100 feet when the way ahead opened up, and they found themselves huddled in a room with collapsed shelves along the wall and what looked like a filthy pane of glass opposite. There were only a few small patches of plant life, almost nothing. Asha shined the flashlight across the glass, where back to front letters read, "Candy Haberdashery." Wasn't that an old word for some sort of store? There was a door slightly ajar, and they walked through it, all speechless. Kobe's frown deepened. There were paving slabs beneath their feet, and they were standing in an actual street, with brick arches and walls, and a row of small storefronts like some sort of old-fashioned shopping mall. It made no sense, because the roof was supported by a mixture of brickwork, metal stations, and beams. "Where in the world are we?" said Asha. They walked on. The remains of furniture sat in some of the rooms they passed. Kobe spotted counters, walls of decorated tiles. A few signs remained. "Mr. Bunting's Confectioners," "Black's Ironmonger," a funeral home with a coffin still sitting on a bier. Mostly, though, the place was empty and abandoned. After a while, Kobe realized his feet were crossing timber floorboards. They climbed 3 steps onto an elevated walkway. "It's like a burial town," said Asha. Her words snagged at a thread of memory, and a moment later Kobe placed it. A book he'd read in the school library. "This is the old Seattle Underground," he said, trying to recall. In the past, maybe the 19th century, it was at ground level. There was a fire or something, and it all got built over. His flashlight flickered a little bit, and Kobe realized right away the one thing he was missing: spare batteries. In one of the abandoned stores across the way, a butcher's shop, judging by the old model of a pig, were a few bundles of modern clothing. Kobe's skin prickled. Did that mean someone else had come down here? More souvenirs, maybe. He found it hard to believe people could be living down here anymore. But then, anything seemed possible now. He entered the shop, which Kobe could tell at once wasn't quarantined. There were moldy camping mats and rolled up sleeping bags. A stove and some empty cans of food lay on the ground, but spider webs covered most of them. Not promising. But someone had been sleeping here at some point. It was the same story in the next room, and Kobe was about to leave when his flashlight beam fell on something bright. Bile rose into his throat as he realized it was an arm bone, with skeletal fingers still attached, sticking out from under a blanket. "Don't let Theon in here," he called. He didn't want the younger boy getting scared. "What is it?" answered Asha from the outside. "Just give me a minute." Kobe moved the sleeping bag with his foot and saw the rest of the skeleton was small and clothed in a dress. One hand still clutched a teddy bear. His stomach lurched, and he turned away and left quickly. "I don't think we're going to find anyone alive down here," he told Asha and Theon. "People must have been trying to escape the waste, but it didn't work." "Do you think they made that tunnel we came down?" Asha asked doubtfully. Kobe shrugged. "Maybe." He breathed a heavy sigh, scanning about. His eyes fell on a backpack. We might be able to scavenge some supplies, though. You want to take a look around and meet back at the haberdashery in a few minutes? Sure, said Asha. I'll shout if we run into any trouble. Fionn went with her, and Kobe opened up the backpack. Not much. Lighter fluid and matches, an old paperback book, a pack of playing cards, a water canteen, a sweater. He took the fire lighting stuff and left the rest. He thought about taking one of the sleeping bags as well, but it felt a bit wrong. Aside from the one small skeleton, he didn't come across any other human remains. They might have moved on before they died, of course, but from the back of his mind, a more worrying option surfaced. If they tried to change camp, why hadn't they taken anything with them? What if something took them? He told himself he was being paranoid. Apart from the spider webs, there was no sign of any other living thing down here. He found some candy bars in a drawer, along with some bottles of soda. They might still be okay. When he emerged and returned to the meeting spot, Fionn and Asha were waiting. Asha proudly held up a small hatchet in one hand and a flashlight in the other. But the axe didn't look all that sharp, and when Kobe tried the flashlight, it was dead. When theirs failed, the darkness down there would be absolute. Fionn had an old smartphone in his hands, inspecting it. Dad said everyone had one of those, said Kobe. Or watches or glasses or even chips inside their bodies. They looked at him blankly, and Kobe guessed that they had been told less about what life was like before the waste than he had. He passed out the candy bars. Fionn looked at him suspiciously. Fionn looked at his suspiciously. Kobe almost laughed. Candy was one of the main foods that didn't perish, and over the years he'd eaten a lot. Something tells me you're gonna like it, he said. Fionn tore his open and took a tentative bite, but soon he was grinning from ear to ear. Kobe's flashlight flickered. Uh-oh, he said. Do you have any more batteries? Asked Asha. He shook his head. Here, hold this. He handed her the flashlight, stood up, and went back into one of the stores. The sweater would do. He tried not to panic whenever the generator had packed up at the school, throwing them into blackness. His dad had said the dark was nothing to be afraid of. But down here, it felt almost physical, a pure, suffocating barrier. They might never find their way out again. He took a length of broken timber, wrapped the sweater tightly around one end, then doused it in the lighter fluid to make a torch. When he lit it, the rich yellow glow of firelight spread through the eerie abandoned streets. At the same time, his heart rate began to slow. He felt a flush of pride as he imagined his dad congratulating him on his quick thinking. The flashlight gave out completely a couple of seconds later. Fionn and Asha looked relieved too. They ate another candy bar each. Fionn says it's peaceful here, said Asha, her face bronze in the flame light. He doesn't seem to mind being up on the surface either, said Kobe. Yeah, said Asha, looking worriedly at Fionn. I wouldn't have guessed he would take to the outside so easily. Personally, I'm a fan of anywhere where there are fewer things trying to kill us. Kobe nodded. He knew where the waste was concerned that the situation could change in an instant. Survival was about being ready for those changes. Never rest on your laurels, Dad used to say. There's always work to be done. We need to make some spare torches, he said. I don't know how long this will last. Leaving Fionn with another candy bar, they went back to fetch more materials. Once they were out of earshot, sifting through the old clothes in the butcher's shop, Kobe whispered to Asha, What's up with him anyway? Why can't he talk? Asha tossed aside a paperback book. He could once. Something bad happened when he was younger. At Heelholm. Kobe remembered the feeling of anger, fear, and loneliness he felt emanating from Fionn during the vision of Heelholm. He remembered what Nikki had said about some kids not being as physically resistant as others. He peered out at Fionn, who was still quietly eating. Poor kid has probably seen more than one of his friends die. And if Asha was right about his condition, he was on borrowed time too. Kobe was starting to suspect that Fionn wanted to spend his last days free of Heelholm, a place where kids slipped into death without ever having truly lived. They finished fashioning the torches, and Kobe then told Asha he was going to look for exits leading to the surface. He made his way past Fion. The younger boy was holding up his hands in the flickering light, making a wolf silhouette against the wall. "That's great, Fion," said Kobe. "That kid really can't get enough of shadow puppets." Kobe carried on along the passageway. The torchlight gradually petered out the farther he went, and it was as he reached the limits of its illumination that he saw something in the roof ahead. The faintish green glow of natural light. He walked directly underneath and realized it was a skylight, crisscrossed with a metal frame. Greenery coated its upper side, but Kobe understood he must be looking at the overground city, and it was dawn. He was about to go back and tell others when they came rushing up to him, firelight playing over their frightened features. "Kobe, something's coming," said Asha, gripping the dart rifle.